As I have mentioned before, there are many there are many kinds of work that various NGOs do, and we freely associate with people around us. And now with the online platforms which have opened up so generously for all types of activities, the roles and responsibilities of organizations are also in a flux. Things are changing rapidly around us. So let us know about some more of the small nitty-gritties and intricacies from our next speaker. I request Shagun Singh, who is our intern and a second year student from NMIMS School of Law, Mumbai, to introduce our next speaker, Advocate Anirudh Valsankar. Over to you, Shagun.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
All right. So good evening, everyone. Our third speaker for the day is Advocate Anirudh Valsankar, who's an advocate in Bombay High Court and Supreme Court of India. He did his LLB from Government Law College, Mumbai, and Masters from Franklin Pierce Law Center, Concord, USA, in intellectual property. He has 19 years of varied experience in transactional registrations, prosecution, litigation, enforcement, and in other diverse areas of law. Advocate Valsankar represents a very reputed set of clientele. Despite being extremely busy, he was gracious enough to help us with many legal dilemmas that we have been facing as an NGO, and also addressed any and all specific questions that we had. Unfortunately, he couldn't be present here for this session because he's traveling, but we are more than grateful for a very enlightening session that we had, which we are going to play for here now. So please welcome Advocate Anirudh Valsankar.
Hello, everyone. A good evening, and it is a pleasure to be here speaking on the topic. And to be honest, it is the first time that I've seen an NGO taking such an initiative, trying to understand things from legal perspective as well. And it has been an honor that I'm addressing this audience on this platform. Today's talk is based on my discussions with Dr. Purnima, Ishan, Shagun, and after understanding the issues generally that they face day in and day out, I've just sort of categorized broadly the issues faced by an NGO. And of course, there might be, I'm keeping this very general and I'm not addressing any particular pinpointed incidents or an experience, but addressing it in a very generality and from a bird's eye standpoint. The way I've categorized this, the issues are privacy, confidentiality, professional misconduct, a gray area stepping into the realm of defamation, consent related with contracts, data, because that is how you deal with it, some aspects of copyright law, and when you deal with third-party content. Now, I plan to take these issues one by one and somehow address and give you a brief idea how things are. Predominantly, in terms of legislation, what we deal here is, of course, Indian Contracts Act, because that is the legislation that we talk about when we deal with consent, contracts, so on and so forth. In terms of privacy, in terms of confidentiality, in terms of liabilities, which start dealing with the Information Technology Act 2000, which to some extent deals with some issues of it. There are other legislations which are in pipeline, but they haven't seen the light of the day in the sense of they are not enacted legislations as yet. But I must point out that those legislations would be soon to come in some form or the other. The latest being the Personal Data Protection Bill 2019. So in a sense, they do deal with all these aspects of it. And I'll start taking things one by one. So when we start talking about privacy protection, recently it has been recognized as a fundamental right of privacy, wherein essentially once privacy cannot be intruded. The way we traditionally understand privacy was in terms of physical privacy, but now it is more in terms of information related with a person, and that has been recognized as under the Constitution, Article 19 and Article 21, to be more precise. And so you essentially cannot intrude on one's privacy. Now, how does it relate when we talk about an NGO? Now, I'm told that NGO, particularly this NGO, deals with a lot of mental health of people, where participants suffering from various illnesses, depression, or like, actually do participate. So there is a database that is created, which has all the particulars listed of those candidates, participants, and how do we deal with it. So essentially, again, it's all about consent. So I must point out that when we start talking about the legislations also, recently there has been a health data management policy that has been framed, and which will take a shape in form of the PDP, Personal Data Protection Bill. Again, all these frameworks are essentially consent based. So when we talk about consent, we talk about essentially an underlying contract. You take consent from the participating people in the right format, where they do not have objections in terms where this data, whether it is health related data or whether it is their sensitive personal data, is somehow used in some format. Now, one has to be very particular when certain participants do not actually give consent. They have reservations. So NGOs will have to have system in place where those data is actually not leaked or accessed, thus intruding their privacy as well. It is also a very close issue with confidentiality as such. So there are many aspects where participant might not be comfortable, since that's a very crucial sort of information, which is not easily available in the industry. So it's not particularly related with the personal information as such, but it could be. So what is the confidential information? Information that has value and that is not easily available in the market. I'm just putting it very generally. Let's not get into the legalities as such, just to put things in a right perspective for you to understand and perceive things. So again, confidentiality is also a main issue that a certain NGO would be grappling with. If you intrude, if you breach privacy, confidentiality aspects of it, apart from contractual liabilities, there would be civil as well as criminal liabilities under the Information Technology Act. So again, when we start dealing with confidentiality and privacy issues, contract is essential, consents are essential. So you should be able to gather what all information, where you would need it, you want it free flowing. That organization needs to have the right consents, right disclaimers, waivers in their contracts from the participants, whether it be in a certain workshop or even otherwise. I must, it also touches a certain copyright aspect of it, meaning thereby when the databases are created, it's a compilation which can be subject matter of a copyright, because compilation of literary works is copyrightable work as such, subject matter for protection. To what extent it's like telephone directory, meaning thereby that the names and addresses are there, but the telephone directory still is compiled and in a certain manner, like the yellow pages, for example. It does have separate copyright protection to it. So how do you distinguish between what is mine and what is, I overstep the privacy or confidentiality? Well, we have to actually deal with all these issues on a one-on-one basis, on a case-to-case basis. But again, the crux is consent, contract. You have to have proper contracts in place and consents as well. So the other issues are when we talk about defamation or professional misconduct, many a times it could happen that, certain information, although we believe it to be true, but may not be ascertained, we start stepping into the gray area of whether I'm actually defaming a person. So whatever factual aspect we sort of communicate to the public, it should not happen that we know it to be false or something and then accidentally circulate it. So you have to be very careful about that. Professional misconduct. Now, while addressing, I'm told that there are seminars, workshops taken where in a zeal to create awareness, educate people, many a times certain experiences are shared, thumb rules or advices are given. I am myself giving something right just right now. So the underlining crux would be disclaimers are put in place, maybe in terms of announcement at the start of the program or at the end, where generally people are advised that although these experiences or advices given are by and large okay in a certain given situation or in a certain facts and circumstances of the case, one should reach out for a professional advice, help, and then only act accordingly. Now, whether despite having such disclaimers in place and proper care being taken, whether a NGO conducting such a workshop would be held liable for any misdeeds that may happen. Well, I think as long as the bona fides are put in place in terms of disclaimers, uh, announcing that the candidate or the participant needs to obtain proper advice, then I think an NGO should be in a good position to be held not liable for all these acts. Again, I would highlight the requirement of a consent when. So I would suggest that when such workshops are taken, proper disclaimers or consents from the participants are very well there in place. I can very well understand that this means a lot of paperwork, but in coming times when we are dealing with personal information, this is inevitable. People are already struggling in Europe where all these GDPR details, etc., regulations are there, where sensitive information is handled by people. So we are, stepping on the same lines. Talking about copyright and content, uh, there are issues where you start talking about dealing with third-party content, in the sense where some questions were on the lines of what if certain pictures of the participants, snaps of video calls, or for promotional purposes are put on Twitter or social media handles. So again, participant consents need to be taken in order to put all these pictures, because one, if I'm not interested to have my picture, or if I'm not interested for the world to know that I am actually interested in such domain, probably, that particular NGO is exposing itself for some kind of a potential liability there. Pictures, events, or even, these are potential third party content that we are talking about. So even we are also talking about copyright infringement. So one should be very, very aware about what kind of content are we using for what purposes, even if it's for promotional purposes, because that is where, NGOs also start, I may not be it may not be right to say competing with each other, but for promotional purposes, yes, that is where some sort of an activity would be said to be an infringing activity. When we again look into databases or third-party content, copyright will also become very much relevant a field for an NGO to be aware of. I guess, apart from this, essentially, when we talk about these issues, consent becomes a fundamental, parameter for an NGO to watch on. And one should deal with confidentiality, privacy in a very sensitive manner. And contracts need to be put in place when you start dealing with even people who are actually handling all this information. So whether it be an intern, so whatever nomenclature, whether it is an employee or a volunteer or an intern or whatever, the information, the access to this information should be regulated. If it is consents are, in place, in the sense of, not in terms of confidentiality, not to be disclosed it so easily, then more and greater responsibility lies with an NGO. And that's where these contracts are going to be useful so as to avoid any liability as far as an NGO is concerned. The other thing could be in the contract where liability is limited. Again, that has to be incorporated in that agreement. Hence, a good contract drafted which addresses most of the requirement of an NGO is strongly suggested. I think with this, I've highlighted most of the issues, and I hope I'm addressing the general questions that have been put to me. However, I'll be happy to answer any questions that are placed either by Dr. Purnima, Ishan, Shagun, or through them, any other questions that people may have.
I welcome Advocate Talekar and Advocate Agarwal to the live Q&A session. I have one question to Advocate Talekar. You have covered, Advocate Talekar, you have covered in your talk about what happens to an NGO when it actually stops working. But I would just like you to repeat that a little bit. So can an NGO be sold off to another group of people who want to run it later on, and or can it be treated like a commodity, like, or will it always be through the charity commissioner that anything will be done?
So, there are different types of, first of all, let me just congratulate you and the other organizers for doing this session. I think it's been very valuable and very different insights have come together.
Thank you so much.
About the question, so like I mentioned in the talk as well, there are different types of entities through which an NGO can operate. One could be a company, the other could be a society, and it could also be a public trust.
Yeah.
So if it is the Charity Commissioner's Office, we are looking at a public trust. If you're looking at a society, it's under the Societies Registration Act, and all of these different statutes have a different procedure for how the body which is governing the trust or the entity will operate.
Okay.
But the underlying principle on both the trust and the company is that it will not dissolve automatically, or it cannot be sold. But what can happen is the directors, if it's a company, the directors can step down and the other directors can step in. Similarly, in a trust, you could have different members taking place of the position that you held earlier with a resolution, and then change reports need to be filed with the Charity Commissioner's office, which need to be approved. So the procedure has to be followed. What I would say is, instead of doing this very casually, if something needs to be done, then it must be done properly after seeking advice and soliciting a clear opinion on what is it that you want, with the understanding that there are no profits sharing involved. A question of sale would come in only if there is a consideration on both sides, right? If you're getting something and in return. But NGO being an entity where there is no profit to be earned, it's a little counterintuitive that somebody would want to buy an NGO. So there could be other sorts of trouble that, you know, entities would be calling for if there's a sale, outright sale of this kind.
So it is more of a taking over of an NGO rather than a...
Right. And with good cause, which should come in the resolution and then go to the Charity Commissioner's office with a change report.
Correct. Okay, thank you so much. I have got one question for Advocate Apurv Agarwal. So you have mentioned in your talk about the copyright versus patent versus trademark. Could you just highlight on that? Actually, this was a question I asked you that day, but it was cut off from the recording. So what exactly do we take a trademark on? What do we get a copyright on, and what do we get a patent on?
Okay, just very briefly, a copyright is on an expression or writing which is expressed on paper or which is visible to the naked eye. So what you write, you draw, or you sing, or you do anything, you get a copyright on that. Trademark is on a logo, which identifies a product or a service. For example, the Coca-Cola trade, you know, that the way they write Coca-Cola, or the way they write Nike, or the way they write Adidas, or they write, you know, Parle G biscuits, you know.
Yeah. So that would be the trademark.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be a trademark. A patent is on a novel product. You know, for example, right now in Corona times, you know, the coronavirus has been invented by 2-3 companies, Pfizer and Serum Institute and everybody. So the invention of that vaccine is patentable. Okay. And so when you invent something in a novel manner, that is patentable.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So this is the main distinction between the 3 types of IPR. And there are other forms of IPRs also, which I brought out in my speech earlier.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. Padmanabh, you had a question that day. Would you want to ask that to Advocate Agarwal? Regarding startups and patent. Okay. Because now many of the young people, they dream about their startups, and they, especially from the engineering field, they have worked on some process which they want to use as a startup. And his question was mainly that what if it was a group project and the other person steals the idea? So how soon can the patent be applied for? And what is the process in India?
Okay. See, a patent can be applied by an individual or a group of people or by a company or a partnership entity. It need not be by individual. So if it's been a group project, the entire group or the company which is involved can apply for the patent on their group name or the company's name. Secondly, any idea or any product can be stolen technically if it's not been applied for patent. Okay, then you don't have an exclusive right to use that for a fixed period of time. So the idea is if you created something new, you apply for a patent, I mean, I would say immediately or as soon as possible. Don't wait for it. Because one of the criteria of patentability is novelty and newness. If I can show that the product is not new, then I will not be granted a patent. So if I invent a product today and I apply for a patent 6 months line, it is no longer a new product, despite being a novel product. Therefore, then 6 months line, I cannot apply for a patent. Therefore, if I invent a product, I should apply for it immediately as soon as convenient. Alternate to what I would, some of the companies do instead of applying for a patent is to keep it as a trade secret.
Okay.
Like, for example, what Coca-Cola has done, the formula to make Coca-Cola is a trade secret only known to 2 people on this earth.
Okay.
So if it's not patented, nobody can copy it and nobody can use it forever, right? So it's a monopoly on your own right. I mean, there's no compulsion for me to disclose it to anybody, what I know, what I don't know.
Okay.
The only reason why we advise people to patent it that tomorrow, in case that formula gets out of hand and somebody else starts using, at least you have preventive measure for 20 years in India to prevent somebody else from using that formula or the product or whatever it is.
Okay.
Now, to apply for a patent, it's very easy. There's a portal called government portal called patents.nic.in. If you go to that, you can submit all the documents and paperwork. There's a process which takes about a year to patent the product. But in the meantime, till that process is pending, you get what we call an EMR. That's an exclusive marketing right. It's short of a patent, but nobody else can use that product for a year till the patent is not granted.
Okay.
So it gets fully protected by that way.
Okay. Thank you so much. I hope this answers the questions of the budding startup groups. Any other questions from the audience?
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes, Aman.
Hello.
Yes, you're audible.
My question is to Apurva sir. Sir, most of the time I do the voiceovers of book reading or something. So मेरे पास एक book है जो किसी भी writer ने लिखा और I'm giving my voiceovers to that and I'm uploading it into a YouTube channel or Instagram. So will that come under the copyright issues?
The way you give the voiceover will come under copyright issue. You will have a copyright on the voiceover, not on the book.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Nandini ma'am, Sandhya ma'am, Rema, Virendra Kumarji, Manjula Shukla. Any questions? I can see 2 people from this NGO called Mudras. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yes, ma'am, it's Mudras. Just one thing regarding the same question which was asked previously. The person said that he's giving voiceover. So like he will have the patent right.
He'll have a copyright, not a patent right.
Okay. So, but is he not breaking the other person's copyright who has already written the
copyright which the other person is on the way he's written the book.
Yes.
The copyright which this person have is the way he's spoken of the book.
Okay,
because the mode of expression has changed from written.
Mode of expression changed from visual to audio.
Okay.
He'll obviously have to take permission before doing that, but he has a copyright on the way he's spoken about and the way he's spoken of the book.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions? When Advocate Pragna Talekar was telling about the public interest litigations, I was reminded about how the Bangalore chapter of Epilepsy Association filed a PIL as an NGO, as a society, and they filed a PIL saying that epilepsy should be removed from the Marriage Act as a cause, as a grounds for divorce. And this was a, PIL which was fought for, and the Epilepsy Association won against it, and now epilepsy is no longer, it can be used legally as a grounds for divorce. So that was one of the victories of an NGO which affected the way we look at a particular disorder. So yes, sometimes a lot of meaningful work can be done through these things. Yes, Rema, do you have any question to ask?
Yeah, yeah. Can I speak, ma'am?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Ma'am, what are the legal implications if in an NGO where the caretakers of, say for example here, epilepsy, since I am involved in epilepsy as a caretaker, and few people come together, make certain products with the help of the people with epilepsy, and what are the legal implications like trademark, or suppose the products are sold, what all care should I take? And that benefit of that will go to the organization or what, for the benefit of the people themselves only. But in that process, if certain things like eatables or artistic work or regarding the taste of the people with epilepsy, certain things are made, then what sort of, if I create a brand, I should take all such precautions that were all mentioned. I mean, even if I start in the beginning, I have to clear off all that.
Okay, so let me rephrase your question. So, as an NGO, you're creating certain items which, according to the purpose of the NGO, should be sold so that the money goes to the correct beneficiaries, right?
Okay.
That is the situation. Am I understanding?
Yeah, I want for the benefit of the people with epilepsy.
With epilepsy,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful about the
legal implications.
Legal implications, yes. Would you want to answer that, Advocate Agarwal or Advocate Talekam?
Yeah, I'll answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. First of all, congratulations on the work you're doing. I mean, helping epileptic people are a big task unto itself. Now, on the products which you create and the brand which you make, you should register the brand as a trademark. You should register brand as a trademark on the Trademarks Act in India, so that nobody else can use that trademark. And two, people recognize where the product is coming from. That is coming from your NGO, which is working epileptic, like what Salman Khan has done with his brand, NGO called Being Human. So, Being Human is a registered trademark. So even your brand, I don't know what your brand name is, can be registered as a trademark. So all the products can be sold under that trademark. Okay. Number two, see, the food products cannot be patentable. Okay, but if you're selling any other products which is novel, or the process of making it is novel, you can have the process patentable or the product patentable if it's new, or there's a novelty factor to it. Okay. So that, I mean, I can't advise you what are products, I mean, because I don't know what products you're selling, but we can do a study for that and advise you on a separate platform on that front. As regards if you're doing any writings or books or any creating any literature, those are copyrightable and can be sold only under your name through the NGO, and nobody else can, reproduce that or recreate that and sell it under any other name.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for asking your question. Also, it was a very important question. Alka Ekbote, you had raised your hand. आपका कोई सवाल है?
Yes, my question is regarding the public interest litigation.
Yeah.
It was mentioned that anybody can file a public interest litigation. Suppose if the public interest litigation is done for the atrocities which are done on somebody else. Okay, can it be done on a plain paper, just like you said, or it would have a different procedure? Say I'm a doctor. Suppose there are there have been assault on doctors, and I want to have a public interest litigation file on that. What could be the process for that?
Advocate Talekar, would you want to answer that question?
Can I answer that question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Ma'am, a PIL in the it's normally filed in the High Court or the Supreme Court. And the High Court and Supreme Court have been very active in this matter. They have taken up cognizance of taken up PIL even on the basis of a letter sent to the High Court or the Supreme Court. Okay. So even by sending a letter to the relevant court, they'll take cognizance and convert it into PIL. Okay. However, lately what we've seen as a trend, there have been a lot of frivolous PILs being filed. So court are also taking stringent action against people if you are doing a frivolous action. So in case you want to file a PIL, please have it vetted with a proper law firm or lawyer who's aware of these matters and can file it properly for you. But keeping that aside, it can be done on ordinary paper or even by a letter or even by a postcard to the relevant court.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, sir. That was most informative. I, being a doctor, should not pose a problem for it, right? As a person, I can also file.
Individually, you can also file, but we always advise you to go to a reasonable lawyer for the simple reason he knows the process and the procedure to file it properly, so that it doesn't get rejected for want of lack of proper procedure.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So your question, ma'am, was that your being a doctor, does it create conflict of interest?
It doesn't.
Okay, it doesn't. Okay. Shagun, Ishan, Aarti, do you have any questions for sir?
No, ma'am, we're good.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Anyone else? Nandini, ma'am, any questions? Other interns, any questions? So I think no more active questions right now. So I thank you, Advocate Agarwal, for having taken time for being present online as well for the live question answer session.
My pleasure.
So much. Thank you so much.